321,000. The ripple effect of these cuts will be far-reaching and painful. Steel, plastic, carpeting, rubber, and the glass industries will all be forced to lay off their workers. Can General Motors regain its position in the auto market, or is the giant so enfeebled that it is at a point of no return? The Japanese are too far ahead. GM cannot catch up. I ask you, Fred.
Well, GM can catch up, but they need to do a lot more than they've done so far. They've been asleep at the wheel now for several decades, and there's still evidence that they're asleep at the wheel. They have a bloated bureaucracy still. They have a terrible union contract. There are too many man or person hours put into the production of each car. They still have too many plants, and they still put out too many different models of cars, 20 or 30 models of cars that the market doesn't want. They need to stop doing that. They need to do much more of what they did last week.
Joe Klein of New York Magazine, welcome back after a long hiatus. And, of course, you're Joe Klein, a.k.a. Father Confessor to Mario Cuomo.
Oh, it's a heavy burden, John, a heavy burden.
Now, what do you think about this question? Can GM fight its way back?
Well, GM is a metaphor for this country. They may be able to fight their way back, as Fred says, but it's going to take a lot of pain, a lot of work. Capitalism can be rough sometimes. The market system can be rough. And their position in the automotive industry is analogous to our position in the global economy. We got a lot of work to do.
Do you see a prospect of their regaining their domestic share?
Sure.
What do you think, then?
Well, I mean, you can see what's happened with Ford and Chrysler assembly of Ford particularly. I mean, GM has still got 40-some hours, man-hours per car. Ford's down in the 20s. I mean, so it's possible for GM to do that. That's not the basic, that's not what's most intriguing about this story. To me, what's intriguing about the story is that GM is only one of a whole series of big corporations and industries who are saying we're going to have permanent layoffs. Jobs are going. They're going to be, the jobs aren't going to come back just because they sell more cars. They're going to find different ways to do it.
Permanent retrenchment.
Permanent retrenchment.
Did you notice of all the things that they announced that they were going to do, the one thing that they didn't do? They didn't change top management at all. Not one person got fired for this enormous loss. Now, in any other operation, including a country, if somebody piles you that deeply into the hole, you ought to get rid of the top management. These guys have not, as I understand it, the board of directors made them do all the things that they just got through doing. They wouldn't have had the wit to do it by themselves. These guys ought to be fired, and a new team ought to be brought in.
John, there's another thing. And bonuses, too.
The GM and the bonuses, that's a good point, Joe. They'll still
What's
give
Joe's point?
That they will continue to give themselves, the officials of the company, large bonuses.
The top
yeah,
brass.
the top, okay. But there's another thing. To have the head of GM, Bob Stempel, go on this trip with Bush to Japan, as he's planning to do in January, and pretend like GM's problems are caused by Japan.
Okay.
Is ridiculous. They're caused in Detroit.
This leads into this question. Why did this happen to GM? Here's what Chairman and CEO Robert Stempel says.
We cannot blame our problems totally on the war, the plunge in consumer confidence, or the recession. Rather, we must make fundamental changes in the way General Motors does business if we are to improve our performance.
But Stempel also faulted George Bush.
As we have told the administration since March of this year, the economy was starting to slide. And I was told that, no, the figures were turning it around. Don't worry, it's going to be okay in the summer. We went back in the summer and we said it's slid a little further, and I've lost a few more dealers and a few more suppliers. It's okay. You're too pessimistic. Well, I think we waited as long as we can.
24 hours later, after meeting with Stempel and with Chrysler's Lee Iacocca and with other business leaders, President Bush made a stunning about-face. Bush shed his personal conciliatory approach to the Japanese and pledged to confront Tokyo on his upcoming trip to Japan with the U.S. businessmen.
I would say that the trip is to break down intransigence where we find it and have freer and fairer trade. And that message I will carry very, very forcefully.
Despite President Bush's earnestness, can the government, whether the White House or the Congress, really do anything to rescue these recession-battered companies like General Motors? Joe Klein.
Only if you give them better trained workers and maybe a little bit better capital gains treatment. It's their fault. It's not the government's fault. They've been making lousy cars for 20 years. And this notion of bringing the 40 executives over to Japan to do a little bit of Japan bashing may play well in Middle America in January for the president, but it's also going to open the door for Dick Gebhardt and the Democrats to force a heavy protectionist trade bill through the Congress this summer and force the president to react to it.
What you say here is that this is no different a political stunt than the J.C. Penney's visit to buy the socks. He's taking these guys over there because the polls show this is a hot-button issue, and it really is. And that's all this is about. It has nothing to do with saving the auto companies or making any serious progress with the Japanese.
There is one issue on which it's legitimate to go over there and beat up on the Japanese, and that is on auto parts. We're not going to sell cars over there because we don't build them with the drive on the right-hand side, but auto parts they won't let in. We do make good auto parts, and that you can open a wedge on, as we have done with satellites and high-technology computers and that kind of stuff quite successfully in the last year.
Fred? Jack's right about this being a stunt, and we see here with George Bush, there is a domestic policy or a policy that he really believes in, and that's free trade. And you watch him on this trip, he's going to go over there and start professing protectionist sentiments because now his foreign policy and international policy is being driven by a panicky domestic concern.
I agree that this is short-term politics, but it's not protectionism to go over there and to drive open markets and to get them to buy our stuff. That's not protectionism.
That's not what he's doing. What he's doing is playing middle American politics. He's doing this to counteract
everybody wants him to do that, and I think it's legitimate.
That's not what Semple wants. That's not what Lee Iacocca wants. That's not what the polling of
what
the
they want.
They want
to
put up
is
protectionist barriers.
What they want is voluntary restraint agreements, import quotas. Bush is not going to give it to them.
What kind of a macroeconomic impact is GM shutting down these operations going to have? What kind of an impact on the macroeconomy? Joe, can you speak to that?
Not as big an impact as the growth in the money supply of the last month. M1, M2, M3 are all going up. I think there's going to be a recovery second or third quarter.
Well, let's get out. Let's use that as an exit question.
You weren't expecting that.
Very upbeat, very
upbeat. You wanted a
upbeat.
voice of pessimism.
Let's get out. Let's get out on that. Are you saying what Joe just said, that you seeing a recovery in 1992? If so, during the first quarter, which is January, February, March, or April, May, June, or July, August, September, or October, November, December? 1, 2, 3, or fourth quarter? Which one?
First. I think we'll have a positive first quarter, maybe even a barely positive fourth quarter of 1991.
Buster Beetle Bonds, I ask you this question. Will the recovery that you foresee with your far-darting gaze perdure?
Yes.
And we've heard from you. Second?
Wait a second, though. If the Democrats run this presidential campaign purely on the economy, they're walking into a trap, I think. I think it's going to be a short-range recovery followed by inflation.
How long will the recovery last? Through the election?
2 quarters.
2 quarters, second and third?
Yeah.
That doesn't bring, well, that brings you into the, but almost into the
Christmas
election.
season next year.
Almost
That's enough.
Okay,
That's
what
enough.
do you think, Jack?
I don't know. I was listening to hear what Fred said because he's been predicting a 5% growth rate for 10 years. But my guess is that this thing is so bad it's going to be at least 3 quarters.
When are they going to climb out of the recession? When are we?
Second quarter and third quarter will be up. Fourth quarter of next year will be down again.
Answer: third and fourth quarters will be up. Issue 2, no go for Mario. New York Governor Mario Cuomo ended months, strikes that, years of political flirtation by finally announcing he will not run for president in 1992. What's the impact of Mario's decision? Jack, come on.
Well, the first impact is he is off the national political stage, period, paragraph. I mean, this is, after this dance, this is the end.
You've begun this as final. Final. He cannot run no matter what in 92, right?
Right. If he had, what the impact on the field is this. If he had run, there was every reason to expect a polarization between him and Bill Clinton, with the Southerners and more conservative Democrats rallying to Clinton, which would have made it very difficult for any of the others to be heard. Now you have a chance that both Harkin and Kerry, as well as Clinton, will be heard. You can have a three-way race. It'll be quite interesting. Joe?
I think that that's true, although Clinton's the only one who's actually been moving over the past month, making progress. But this Cuomo thing is really an embarrassment. I mean, to take it down to the last minute and then to say no, you got to figure that that wasn't the real reason. He wasn't going to let Ralph Marino and the New York State Republicans stand between him and the presidency. If he really wanted to run, he was going to run. And this is just a rationale.
So what's the true reason? Are you saying that he's not running?
I don't think he, in the end, really wanted to do it.
Why?
I mean, why? I don't know why. Who
Look,
knows why
you talk
with
to him on
Mario?
the phone all the time. You're probably as close as anyone in the journalistic world to Mario Cuomo.
Well,
you and Jamond here. Now, my question to you is, you've got to have some intuition as to why he's not doing it.
I think that St. John's is probably going to have a pretty good basketball team this year, and he wanted to stay home and watch a lot of the games. I don't know.
True.
Look,
Who
there's
knows?
another- what do you say?
Look, I take at face value that he had said this to the voters. He hadn't worked out the budget deal. If it hadn't been worked out, I bet he would have run.
Look,
but there's one other thing. The White House has been dumping all over Cuomo for weeks, saying, boy, we hope he runs. We hope he gets in there. He's so beatable. New York's so terrible. They are breathing a sigh of relief about this because Cuomo would have been very tough for George
Fred,
Bush.
if Cuomo's rationale was that the Republicans were irresponsible economically, he had a ready-made example in New York State if he wanted to run.
Right. I frankly think that he could have been beaten in New Hampshire. That he was not this great. He was an 800-pound gorilla whose defeat would have maximized the candidate that beat him. And it's kind of too bad that he's not running, but he easily could have been beaten in New Hampshire, especially because they are low-tax people, and New York is a high-tax state. And if there's a place that's going to appeal, where the anti-New York appeal is going to work, it would
All
be
right, I
there.
got a question. If you were Ron Brown, the head of the Democratic National Committee, or if you were voicing the collective sentiment of the elite, the establishment of the Democratic Party today, would you breathe a sigh of relief at hearing that he's not going to run? Or would you be more disappointed? I ask you, Fred.
I think I'd be more disappointed. I think that Mario Cuomo is such a large and magnetic figure that you would have wanted him in the field.
What do you think, Joe?
Relief. Anyone this indecisive about it, anyone who doesn't want it, wasn't going to get it. And
Are
now
there other reasons why there's a sense of relief, perhaps, out there? Is Mario really an uncontrollable loose cannon on the deck?
I think that discipline has always been his problem, and he wouldn't have been a great candidate. It would have been a tough race for him.
He would not have been a great candidate.
No.
Would he have gotten the nomination, in your judgment, if he had run?
I don't know. The Mario who ran for governor in 1982 was a great candidate. If that guy had showed up, he might have won.
What has happened to Mario since then?
Well, he's been living in a mansion for 10 years.
You mean he's gone soft?
I don't know. I think that he's been in power for a long time. He's a different guy. He's not as hungry, certainly.
What do you think,
let
guys?
me
To
make
all
a-
those questions.
let me make
First
a-
of all, is there relief?
Let me make the point about the question of relief or disappointment. I mean, I agree with Joe. There's good reason for relief in the sense that he didn't want it bad enough, and that's bad in a candidate. Nonetheless, if he had run, one of two things would have happened. He would have proven that he could win all over the country to get the nomination, or someone else would have beaten him and been elevated by beating him. So in the long run, it is not a good thing for the Democratic Party, no.
It's not a good thing.
No.
What do you think?
I agree exactly with what Jack said.
You think it's not a good thing that he did not?
I wish he had run and somebody had beaten him and therefore been magnified and have been seen as a more worthy opponent for George Bush.
You could argue it either way. He's such a tough campaigner. He might have really done damage to whoever beat him as well.